So what I'd like to do tonight is to have a conversation about your relationship with technology and your kids' relationship with technology, which often creates a bit of friction in the home, and what could be a nice framework that we could work from ends up becoming shouting matches, and it can become quite fractious, and it can be quite controversial and create a lot of friction, which is unnecessary. So the game plan tonight is I want to just give some context to the conversation we're having by discussing some ideas and concepts, just so that we can create a common vocabulary when we're talking about the framework, and as a common reference point for you to talk to your kids and to other people about. And some of the stuff you might know and have been exposed to already. So I'm going to look in the crystal ball a little bit quickly, and I'll explain why I'm doing this. The first thing that I think that's going to happen in the education space, or just generally, is that email is going to die with the older generation, in the same way that snail mail has died with the older generation. And if you think that's a joke, I have to WhatsApp kids and tell them to check the emails. So emails is going to become something for formal, a way to send documents to each other and images, but it's not going to be the primary source of communication. The second thing is that the tech gap between parents and kids is going to continue growing because of the way that they look and think about technology and engage with it, whereas as older adults we kind of get stuck in a rut and kind of focus on what we need to get the job done. And that the last thing is that the immersive nature of VR, virtual reality, is fundamentally going to change the way that we educate kids in the learning process, how they socialize, and how we entertain ourselves. Mr. Singh had the opportunity to do a little bit of VR in the classroom, and it really is going to be transformative as soon as it becomes open source. So those three things in mind, I'm mentioning them and looking in the crystal ball just to kind of accentuate that this problem is not going to get easier, it's only going to get bigger, and it's going to be something that we need to have conversations with. So I'm going to describe a situation for you. You're sitting in a meeting, checking an email, your phone goes, you're checking your phone, you're considering what you're going to be ordering for dinner, watching a YouTube video on the side, and having a meeting. Who kind of does that in a workday? At the same time. So who thinks that they are good at multitasking? Come on, ladies, you all think that men can't multitask, women can multitask. Guys, there's no such thing as multitasking. It's a fallacy. And the reality is that it's called task switching. We can't do two things at once. There is an exception, and that is if you are unconsciously competent in something like walking, you can walk and talk at the same time, but you can't do two physical things at the same time. However, in saying that, if you see people talking on their cell phones and walking, you know that multitasking might actually be a problem. But when you are casually talking to each other on a walk or something, you can do that. And certainly texting in a car while driving it is two physical tasks happening at the same time. The thing about task switching or multitasking is that it comes at a cost. And that cost is predominantly productivity, because you lose focus and you start making errors, and the more you are switching between the tasks that you're doing, the more areas of your brain are having to work, and the more the transactional cost is. And research shows that up to 40% of your productivity is lost from that transactional cost of multitasking. Technology is a problem because we get distracted. The emails ping, the notifications go off on your phone, and you're automatically switching tasks instead of being able to focus on what you need to focus on. I'm sure that task switching doesn't help kids or people with ADHD or ADD either. So I'll just read a couple of facts for you. It takes more time to get the task complete when you keep switching. You make more errors. When the tasks are more complex, you make more mistakes, and the cost is higher, and you lose 40% of your productivity, and your brain is working harder to be able to keep up with what you're expecting to do. Then the next concept I'd like to discuss is 21st century skills. It's a big thing that has been touted in schools about getting the next generation ready and what 21st century skills look like. And I'm going to go through very briefly what they are so that we're all on the same page, and the 12 abilities that they think students need to succeed in the world today. But I want to precede that with a conversation that says that none of the 12 abilities in the 21st century skills are achievable without a fundamental basis of organizational skills, self-discipline, good study habits, and an ability to do work. Without that foundation, we can work on that as much as we like. We're not going to get those skills embedded in the students. So when we are looking at creating the framework, we obviously want to promote this kind of thing, but at the same time, we can't do it to the exclusion of the basic skills, like the reading and the writing, the basic literacy that needs to happen. So the first category, there are 3 categories that are broken up to, is in learning skills, which is critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication, often referred to as the 4 C's. And a lot of this is built into the hidden curriculum within the school. It's something that we have had to learn as adults to work in the workplace without having been taught it, and it's something that we're busy teaching at the moment. I think critical thinking is probably one of the most important parts of this when it comes to the framework, because it's about the safety of the students, how they engage in the internet, how they are keeping their, they're engaging responsibly with the way that they use technology and the internet and social media and things like that as well. The second category is your literary skills. So it's information literacy, understanding the facts, data, being able to look at information and break it up into useful chunks of information. Your media literacy, understanding how we communicate with each other, how things are published, how we share our ideas, and technological literacy. And I'm going to break that up a little bit later, but it's understanding the machines that make the information age available, what we're busy doing right now. And then the last one is the life skills. Flexibility, being able to deviate from plans. Leadership, motivating teams to be able to do work. Initiative, starting projects, strategies, and plans on your own. Productivity, maintaining efficiency and effectiveness in an age of distractions. And social skills, meeting and networking with others for the mutual benefit of yourself and them and the project that you might be working on. So these are important things that we don't want to take away from students, because your kids need to have these skills to be functional as adults in the workplace one day. But we've got to find the balance between this need and developing these skills while we are sitting with kids who just want to game all day or talk to their friends or not engage in the workspace. So that's where the balance comes in. I'd like to spend a little bit of time just talking a little bit about the difference between a couple of concepts in learning, and that is sometimes blended learning and hybrid learning gets mixed up in terms of how people understand it. So in the learning space at school, blended learning is the ability to use analog and digital for input and output. In other words, you could be reading a document on the computer while you're busy writing in your book, or you are typing on the computer while reading in a textbook, or you are just writing in your textbook and not doing any of it. That's blended learning, and we all operate in a blended space. Your workspaces need to be set up that you are able to have your diary open next to you, a book that you can reference and see digitally if you need to be able to do that as well. And that means a bit of space on your desk for your printed material. Some of us prefer to read printed material. Who prefers to print the stuff out to read it when you're editing and that, instead of reading it? Yeah, there's something in that, in how we access the information. Sometimes, especially if we want to get deeply into the information, it's better to be able to print it out so you can highlight it. There's something about the tactile bit of that that works and helps. Then hybrid learning is learning either in a digital space or in a physical space. It's the differentiation between I'm learning in a digital space, but I'm not physically present in the classroom at the moment. I might be digitally present in the classroom in the learning experience, or I'm physically in the classroom and it's a hybrid between being able to do both of those. So non-hybrid would be being physically in the classroom only, or online, which means you are totally online and you don't have any physical engagement in the classroom, or like at EduInc, when you've got a hybrid solution where you can be physically in the classroom in a digital capacity, or either or, whatever the combinations might be. Okay, so just keep that in mind. The other thing I'd like to talk about is that when people who sell educational products for teaching make as though tech is going to take over teaching. They think it's going to change the way fundamentally that we do things, and it will, but technology is a tool. No one's going to replace the teacher who facilitates. The role of the teacher might change, but teachers are not going to disappear. Even with artificial intelligence, it might guide a more individualized path with the students, but it's not going to take away the means to facilitate and the hidden curriculum and the way that kids are taught to learn and engage with the learning process. You know, I still was at school when they had green boards, not blackboards, green boards with chalk. And then it was whiteboards with markers. And then it was colored markers. And then it was what we've got now, digital projectors or smart boards and things like that. Fundamentally, all that's happened is information has been displayed in a different way, but it hasn't changed the way that we are engaging in the learning process. What I think COVID has done differently is forced us to use more technological tools to engage in learning in a different way. And that's where we're going to start seeing some of the interesting things happening. But fundamentally, a computer in your classroom gives you access to information. It's just a glorified textbook that's a lot more advanced. The way that we still have to think and engage with the information and think critically about it hasn't changed. And it's the teacher's role to start guiding students through that and to push them into that space. They need the technology to be able to access the information these days and maybe put output, but it's not going to teach them how to think critically. And I think what's important, and part of what the framework is all about that we're going to discuss, is we recognize that it's a tool. Tools can get put down in the toolbox when we don't need them. We don't have to carry, you don't see an electrician walking around with all these tools hanging on them all the time, because there's times when we put it down and we're not using those tools. And I'm going to refer back to, when we're talking about the framework, I'm going to refer back a little bit to the framework that EduInc has set up, because we're quite a robust framework on how we engage with technology at school. And while it's unique for EduInc and our value system, it might give you an idea of how you can adjust things at home to make that framework unique for yourselves. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of the tech for learning is that even at home, technology in the learning space should be a structured and intentional learning space. It shouldn't be the ad hoc, I've got a laptop, therefore I can be in the garden, I can be on the couch, I can be at the dining room table. For it to work effectively, as you will all know, is that you should have a space where you have got your tech for work, you've got your tech for communication. If you are using technology to study, you should have two screens. You need to be able to read by just checking like you would a textbook, and then be able to type and work like you would in a workbook. You need a space that you can work in a blended environment, and you can write if you need to. And you need a space that has got over-ear headphones, so that when you're having an online meeting or talking to somebody or watching an instructional video, that you're not distracting the whole house, that you are actually in that moment and able to work in the space that you are, because we don't want the distractions happening. So those over-ear headphones are really good, or the earbuds if you don't have the over-ear headphones, because it helps with the distraction and obviously reduces the transactional cost if we are distracted and looking around the room and things like that. So the 3 Ds are digital literacy or digital skills, digital habits, and digital citizenship. I've grouped digital literacy and digital skills together because they kind of fall in the same kind of category. Digital literacy is the ability to use software, to use Google Classroom, to use emails, to type a Word document, to create a presentation, to use Facebook, to use digital software and hardware to be able to do something. Digital skills is a little bit more about the specialization that you might use a digital tool in your specific career or field of work that nobody else uses. For example, somebody who uses a digital x-ray machine, for example. We don't all know how to do that, and it's not a skill we have to learn, but it's something that they learn, which is a specific skill. Computer programmers, things like that. People who are bookkeepers that use accounting. Angela uses Xero. I don't use Xero. I know how to go into it, but she's learned that specific skill for it. So the digital literacy skills kind of blends depending on, we've all got a general knowledge, but we all have specific skills based on our interests and where we're going with that. Okay? Digital habits is something that we're going to discuss a lot about today, and this is where the framework is basically put in place. Because digital habits is what we're talking about. Who spends too much time gaming in front of the computer, multitasking, not having the discipline to use technology appropriately, and things like that. And then the last one is digital citizenship. And digital citizenship, if I had to put it in 2 words, is about safety and responsibility. And there are people like Emma Sadlier who specialize in talking about safety with your kids. And I'm not going to go into too much detail there because it is a very specialized talk and the legalities around it and all of that kind of thing. What we're talking about is your daily experience at home with your kid and the technology and how that's affecting you. Another concept that I have the conversation with kids about, and this is when talking about creating the framework with your kids at home, is the and the or conversation. And that's essentially, we all want to have an and life. We want to be able to play computer games and go to school and study and go out with our friends and watch movies and play Dungeons and Dragons and etc. and. But when we are not organized, when we are not in control, when we don't plan things properly, it becomes an or life, because then you start dropping the ball, and then the powers that be it your parents or your boss or the bank manager, if you've got your own business, start saying it's or. You do that or this is going to happen, or that is going to be your sacrifice. And the conversation that I have with parents a lot is, my kid is a gamer. Okay, that's fine. How much time do you spend watching TV? I spend 2 or 3 hours a day. How much time does your kid spend watching TV? Nothing. How much time do they spend on, playing a game? 2 or 3 hours. So it's the same. It's equitable. Screen time is screen time. It doesn't matter if you're watching TV. It doesn't matter if you are on social media, if you're chatting with your friends. If you are playing a computer game, it is screen time. It's entertainment. And what's happened and what we're being challenged with is that the way that we entertain ourselves has changed. Streaming services mean that we can sit in the room and every single person is watching a different series based on what they like. It's still screen time. Just because you're vegging on the couch watching the latest, binging the latest series doesn't mean that you are any better off or worse off than your kid who's busy playing computer games for 2 hours or on a Discord chat with their friends overseas or whatever the case would be. Okay. So a lot of the mentor meetings I have with kids are talking about how to create the and scenario. All of us have got much better things to do than study and be at school. We've got a lot of interests, and we certainly want to create those curiosities within our kids without killing them, but it all needs to be fitting into place. And sometimes we have to choose the and, so we still got the and it's not everything, because then we are going to drop the ball. It's a good practice for adults in terms of your own happiness and your own gratification to also have an and life, because if your life is about or, then you certainly haven't balanced it well enough, and it is the antithesis to happiness and to self-actualization as well. Okay. One of the big things that goes with the and conversation is trust. The or conversation happens when trust has been breached. So, Shannon, you're not allowed to answer this question, and nor's Chad, and nor's Sam, because I meant to the three of you. So, how do you build trust? Anybody? How do you build trust? Yeah, I know you know the answer. Tegan, how do you build trust? Tell the truth. So that's honesty. I don't know how, honesty does contribute towards trust. Anyone else got any ideas? How do you build trust? Consistent. Consistency builds trust. So let's get to the answer another way. How do you break someone's trust? Disbelieve in them, don't believe in them. There we go. You don't do what you say you're going to do. That's how you break trust. And it doesn't matter if it's a positive or negative thing. If it's a consequence that's the negative, and you don't do what you say you're going to do, you break trust. So, Tegan, I'm going to ask you again, how do you build trust? If breaking it means you don't do what you say you're going to do. Simple as that. So part of the and conversation is that if you're saying and you're planning that I am going to be sitting at my computer working at that time, then you are, regardless of anybody watching you or not. If you say you are going to go and work out and do gym at that time, then you are doing that. You do what you say you're going to do, builds the trust, and it contributes to the and life and the independence that comes with it. The or life is micromanaging. The or life is very constricting as well. Okay. Before I jump into working on the framework and starting to talk a little bit about that, are there any questions or any comments on where we are at the moment? I'm sure you've all heard of this in different ways. It's been punted quite often. Anybody got any thoughts? Anyone want to add anything? Anyone got any questions? That's a first. Okay. Right. So I'm just going to play a little video clip for the moment to ease us into this stage.
Hi, my name's Dean McCoubry, and I'm the founder of My Social Life. We're the digital life skills program that operates in schools. We teach kids between the ages of 8 to 17, so that is pre-teens and teens. And ultimately, our role is to help them with, first, online safety. Then we seek to make them smarter through exploration, and ultimately that can take them to digital excellence as they move through their high school years and differentiate themselves when they want to apply for the next level of their education. So ultimately I was asked to say, what did I think about this presentation today? And the first thing that I saw was the word tech wars, which of course that is very much how it feels for us as parents and also as perhaps educators and even psychologists. Now those are the four audiences that we teach. We teach parents, teachers, psychologists, teens and preteens. That's 5 different groups, and we sit right in the middle listening to all of them and collating anonymous data from all of them. And it gives us a very privileged vantage point. And what I can say is that actually I think it's going to be less around tech wars and more about moving away from the friction and from almost the sense of frustration that we have, and starting to move towards establishing digital values, which is digital citizenship. And we achieve that by trying to get closer to our kids, trying to understand their world, to understand this online landscape of games, apps, social media, which yes, can be frustrating, is incredibly risky and has cybersecurity threats in it, and kids are cyberbullying, and there are challenges with empathy and so on. But ultimately we need to be able to understand the landscape so that we can equip them with these digital life skills: generosity, empathy, kindness, self-regulation, discipline, and so on. And many parents laugh at that because they don't believe it's achievable based upon where they see their kids now, with their heads stuck inside their devices. But it is. As soon as we bridge the technological divide and we listen more and we take an interest and we quietly both observe them and then research what's actually happening in their lives inside these apps, it allows us to box super clever, to be able to have the conversations with them, to establish the digital values, to be able to firm up agreements in our home, and to be able to firm up relevant school policies around digital and social media. So what we've seen over the 4 years as the leading digital life skills trainer in the country, we've seen that actually it's going to require a different approach against being seen as tech wards. We're going to need to move towards digital potential. We're going to need to exercise a lot more energy around policy and agreements. We're going to need to listen more. We're going to need to do more of our own research. And ultimately at the center of all of that is one of the most incredible commodities of our time, which is time. We're all going to need to try and cut away a little bit more time to listen to our kids, because there's something new in their environment, relatively new, just a decade really since things changed in terms of what happened on Facebook. Once they introduced the like button, then everybody's chemical reward system started firing. And everybody's been looking for attention and seeking to share. And that's created a whole massive seismic change in the social media environment. So my suggestion is that we actually take some accountability for what we as the adults did in terms of giving the devices, connecting them to Wi-Fi, offering them data, giving them permission on certain apps. And that doesn't apply to everybody, and it's certainly not a finger point of blame. It really isn't. But this is what happened to all of us. But we do get to reset the clock here. We do get to say, this is more important than I'd figured, and this has much greater value in terms of first safety, then exploration, and then excellence. And I hope to be working with you at some stage in the future to be able to teach your kids, your teachers, your school counselors, and bring you much closer to some form of unity and harmony around your digital culture in school. Thank you.
So before we jump into the digital framework, there's a couple of things that I'd like us just to consider. Digital behavior is associated with reclusiveness and antisocial behavior. Kids not wanting to go to school, not wanting to socialize with friends, wanting to go out, they'd rather be on the computer, in the games, not even wanting to socialize with the family. Doors closed. Can't keep eye contact. Can't have conversations with people because they can't read body language. They don't want to socialize physically, and to the point of them not wanting to go to school. And research shows that kids who don't go to school at a regular basis are very unlikely to have a successful schooling career, because the new normal is to stay at home instead of being actually on campus socializing with people. Where does gaming come into this? What is, the value of it, and is there a place for it? Kids have real and meaningful digital relationships and are able to, and friendships digitally, which we don't necessarily understand, but they do. And they spend time really connecting with people from around the world in a global capacity, which is a great thing, and VR is certainly going to change that as well. But we don't necessarily understand it, but for them it's very, very important, and they are important relationships. Parents need to be comfortable that they don't know as much as the kids know with tech. They can create the framework. It's like teachers teaching very smart kids. We don't have to know everything and all the answers, but we can facilitate the process for them to grow in a safe way. Be comfortable not knowing everything, but be comfortable in creating a framework that keeps your family safe and your family values upheld as well. Parents, you model behavior. Kids don't do what you tell them to do. Kids do what they see you doing. If your nose is in your screen the whole time, if you can't put the phone down when having a conversation with them, you can't expect them to do the same thing. So that's the burden on parents, to model the behavior that they're looking for as well. And something that's very important to me is that a digital device is not a diary. It's not a personal thing that parents do not have access to. If you do not have access to your pre-18-year-old digital devices, there are legal implications to that if they create problems with it. You own it, and it is almost irresponsible parenting not to know what's going on in that space. This is not a diary that's been written in under the, dear diary, and it's my own personal feelings. There might be documents in a folder that say private, which are private, but Emma Sadlier talks quite strenuously about the responsibility that parents have. You buy the phone, it's on your name. If they send pics to somebody and it's underage pornography. You own the phone, you're part of that. It's as bad as that. So just remember, kids, everything you're doing on your digital devices is generally happening in the social space, in a space that people can see. Gaming happens in the public space. Your chats happen in the public space. Your YouTube history, watching YouTube happens in the public space. Surfing the internet happens in the public space. If it happens in the public space, your device is not necessarily a private device. You might have documents on there that you saved, and that's private, but your interactions on the computers are happening in the public space. Okay. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about the framework and how we might go about it. I think the first departure point is to have a vision in your mind what your victory condition is. What is your end goal? In other words, imagine a scenario at home where peace reigns, everybody is acting responsibly with their digital devices, and there's no fighting around the dining room table because someone's now answering the telephone, or someone snuck a phone into the bedroom and they're WhatsApping their friends at 1:30 in the morning type of scenario. So how do you want your kids to conduct themselves privately and publicly with technology? And you are going to set the tone by modeling that for them. How do you teach and reinforce safe and responsible digital usage? And how do you enable the 3Ds without compromising the core values of the family? How do you teach the 21st century skills, the digital citizenship, the digital skills and literacy, and the digital habits without compromising your family values? Because sometimes they do come in conflict. The school says this has to be done and this has to be done at this time. You're going, well, we switch our computers off at 8 o'clock at night. Sorry, that's not going to happen. And actually talking about it and understanding that. The second thing I think that's very important is it's based on your family values and what's important to you, and you need to understand why they're important to you. Simon Sinek, start with why. Why are those values important to you? It's important to me that when we're having dinner, we have dinner around the table and there's no electronic devices, there's no distractions, example. Why? Because that's the only time we get to connect as a family, as an example. And that's why it's sacred and the digital devices go in, on a timeout or something like that. When we are watching the family movie on Sunday night, for example, everyone's there and we are all not being distracted by the digital stuff. What age do your kids get a cell phone? Is it appropriate for teenagers to have unfettered internet access in a bedroom on a computer behind a closed door? Who knows? That's what I'm talking about in terms of your family values and what you think is important. When is gaming allowed? Is gaming seen as something that's directly delivered from hell, or is it something that is part of the culture? I mean, if it might be a way for, mom and dad and son play FIFA and on Xbox, and it's something that they do together and it's a bonding thing, or is it something that isolates members of the families from each other? I think it's important that you build in revision time and discussion for new tech and experiences. Kids are very, very good at finding loopholes. So there are going to be loopholes and there are going to be new technologies and new apps, and you need to be able to say, and kids get older and new things happen. If a child's 11 and there's no cell phone, when they're 13 the cell phone comes, there might be new rules that need to be discussed. And I think that it needs to be time. We're sitting down, we're going to discuss the new tech, there's an issue here, and it's something that's done deliberately and intentionally so that everybody's on board and that everybody knows what's happening. I think it's very important to include the kids in the discussion, and because you might have pain points about technology and things that you're not enjoying, but they might have pain points and things. Dad, I can never talk to you in the car because you are always on your phone talking to people. Or when I'm having a conversation, you get distracted because your phone keeps going off and things like that. That's the kind of thing that they need to be able to express to you, because it might be your blind spot. And it's something that's causing a bit of friction from their side in terms of the relationship. It's not a one-sided deal. I think it's very important to write it down and to publish it so that it's a common. It's very easy for us to hyperbolize the rules and change them as it suits us. But if it's a contract that's written down, it's published on the fridge or wherever behind the front door that everyone can refer back to it, then you're not the bad guy when you're enforcing the laws or the rules. The document and the agreement is the bad guy. I think it's very important to have a digital sunset and sunrise and timeouts at home. And with the Google Chromebooks, I think, Karen, on the Chromebooks that we've got, we've actually can set Google sunsets where it switches the thing off and it only switches it on again at a certain time. That's how important it is, so that your kids are not spending time when they shouldn't, especially the younger kids, on the digital devices. And with your cell phone, why do you need your cell phone in your bedroom? Well, it's got my alarm clock. The most effective way to have your cell phone as an alarm is to put it in another room in the house, so that you have to get out of bed to switch it off, because then you're awake. You can't hit the snooze button and go back to sleep. I think that it's also good to have a place where the tech lives. So at 8 o'clock, our tech goes off. None of us are on our tech, except to be checking when, we might be watching Netflix, for example. It's a different type of screen, but we're not social media. We're not connecting with our friends or whatever. And it all goes, there's a table, dining room table or side table that it goes, all the charges go in there and everything happens and you know where it is. Then it's easy to do roll call. Where's your phone, Jono? Oh, sorry, it snuck it into bedroom, and then there's consequences that go with that, I think it's important that different rules apply to different people based on their needs and their circumstances. A grade 5 boy, when your digital sunset is with your computer and device, might be 6 o'clock in the evening. It's certainly not going to apply to a teenager who's got homework to do until 9 o'clock, for example, or a parent who has an international phone call or Google Meet or something that they want to do. But I think it needs to be discussed so that it doesn't look like it's duplicitous. It looks like it's fair and that different people have different needs. Equality doesn't mean we all get the same thing. Okay? Equity is about giving people what they need and everybody understanding why they're getting it, etc. Okay? I think it's important, as I've already mentioned, to discuss everybody's pain points and pet hates, because it might come up from the other way that you have got a bad habit that you might have a blind spot to that's causing some friction at home. And I think you also need to discuss the consequences of breaches, specifically for the kids. What happens if you are not obeying the rules, if you are gaming when you're not supposed to be, or you've got a digital device in your bedroom when it should have, gone to bed at sunset type of thing. And the challenge is that the first inclination, and I'm just putting it out, there's no right or wrong, the challenge is our first inclination is to take the devices away. But it kind of undermines what we're trying to do in teaching responsibility and actually using the tech to develop skills that needs to happen. There might be other ways, chores around the house. I think pocket money hurts just as much as digital devices, so I don't have the money to spend on my digital platforms and Steam and things like that when the pocket money's been taken away, or community service around the home or something like that. I don't know what it looks like, but that's where your family values come in. And I'm certainly not saying that abuse of technology means that we don't take the technology away to learn how to use it better, but maybe a consequence would be it's used under supervision instead of taking it away so that the skills are still developed, etc. I'm just putting it out there as an example and an idea. And then my final word on this is a tip. Mrs. H and I have very different habits when it comes to using tech. All my notifications on my phone are switched off, and on my computer, I choose when I'm going to look at my WhatsApps and when I choose, because I am very distractible, and I like to be able to say, right, I'm going to sit and do my emails, and I sit and get my emails done. And I might check them once or twice a day. At this time, generally, it's every second day because of, the way things are going. I check my WhatsApps first thing in the morning, maybe at lunchtime, and then just before, dinner or whatever, to see the final bits and pieces, and then I leave it. But that's me personally. I know that transaction cost for me is very big. I'm very comfortable leaving my phone when I get home. It gets put down on the counter and it stays there. The only time my phone makes a noise is when it wakes us up in the morning and we have to climb out of bed and walk into the kitchen and switch the thing off, and then I'm awake, and that's what happens. So the Terminator movies were correct. The machines do control us, and they control us with little pings and notifications and vibrations and things like that. And I think it's time for us to take back some of that control. And I think what I'm finding is that the anxiety levels keep going when the stuff keeps coming in, ping, 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 lots of emails, just to calm down and actually take a little bit of control back over the technology. Because I'll give you an example. EduLink doesn't allow kids to bring cell phones to school. And a lot of kids say, but I need my cell phone in the classroom. For what? If I need to go onto Google and see something, well, we've got computers and laptops that you can do that with. If I need to phone my mom, well, your mom doesn't need to know what's happening on blow by blow and what's happening in the classroom. If it's urgent, you go to Mr. G and he'll determine if you're just having a drama moment or if you really need to speak to your mom and dad. There's no need for the cell phone in the classroom. An exception is at the moment the prefects are walking around taking pictures for, our advertising and social media and just getting a nice library going. But that's an exception, and in a week or two, they'll be signing their phones in again. Kids who need their phones after school get to sign them in, but they know what those rules are. Our WhatsApp policy. If the kids are on a group at school, Mrs. H and I are on that group, and we all know what's happening on that group just for safety, and that's part of the citizenship side of things. So I'm just using it as an example of how we've created a framework for protection, for ease of use, to be able to focus on the tasks that we're doing. It's funny because I see the matrics coming in when you finished your prelims. Mid-winter school, you'll have your cell phones with you, watching them on the desk and suddenly seeing the distractions that happen with it every year. And it's like, put that in your bag because they will be switching it over. And you get to see it in action after having a year or 12 years of teaching kids without the cell phone distracting them. So it's a real thing. So that's my advice to you. It's really made me a happier person and getting more productive. It might feel a bit difficult at times, but that's my thoughts. So I've shared some ideas with you. Anyone got any specific questions? Anything? I can't be specific about the framework because it's unique to yourselves, but I'd like to think that I've given you enough of a tool to sit down and start talking about it. It's not going to be a half an hour conversation. It's going to be, right guys, we've got a bit of work to do, a bit of thinking to do, discussion, a bit of argy-bargy, some honesty that happens in that space, and an opportunity to really reflect on what's important to your family and what your values are and what you really want to get out of this. Yes?
Just you commented and said that screen time is screen time.
Just talking to the mic so that
screen time is screen time.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced about that. I think that watching TV is different to playing a game, different to watching TikTok. I don't know. I don't know if anyone else agrees that screen time is. So if you could just clarify.
So the reason I made that statement is under the guise of entertainment. Screen time is screen time for entertainment, and I'm talking about entertainment. Gaming is probably more healthy for your brain in terms of entertainment than sitting vegging on the couch watching TV. There's more activity happening, there's problem solving and things like that. But at the same time, it's another form of escapism. And I think what we need to differentiate is the difference between screen time for work and screen time for entertainment. Because chatting to your friends on Discord is entertainment. Watching TV is entertainment. Gaming is entertainment. And I feel, personally, that's my opinion, and you're more than welcome to differ, but it's not about the screen and the activity we're doing on it, it's the purpose behind it. Is it for us to chill out, relax, to entertain ourselves? Yes. And entertainment on screens is certainly ballooned. When we were kids, it was only the TV. There was nothing else, But there is screen time for work. And I think there's a different focus on what that looks like. And when you don't want your young kids on screen all the time working, but they're also using it for entertainment. So that's where you've got to find the balance, I think what's important about creating a framework at home like this is that a lot of companies are creating digital frameworks and policies where they work. And you don't want your kids walking into a workplace or into another, into a tertiary institution or something like that, and falling foul because they don't have the habits and the framework to be able to conduct themselves digitally in an appropriate way. EduInc has got policies for teachers when it comes to phones and how we use the digital stuff. We've got a digital policy and everybody knows. And the kids know what it is. If a teacher's answering a phone call in the class, we're going to know about it because we don't do that. But if they're WhatsApping and attendance or just communicating with people, that's part of the process. So it's not just about home that you're having a framework created. Companies are starting to do this as well, so that, especially because we've got transgenerational employees in the same place with different expectations and different values when it comes to technology, companies are doing this as well. And your kid needs to have a voice in this space and also, know how to function properly in the space without embarrassing themselves or getting themselves into trouble and things like that. Guys, your kids do not need their cell phones next to them when they're studying. There's absolutely no reason for it. Oh, I needed to connect with my friend. Sorry, your friend, you can, if it's that important, you do it through Google Classroom or something. But, there are lots of excuses for it to happen. But, personally, if Jackson and I had kids, teenagers would have, their gaming computer would be in a space that's public, so they can game and we can see what's going on. Your bedroom is a private space, but it's not going to have where you've got unfettered internet access and things like that. And we would probably be modeling, as we are now, that there's a digital sunset. The technology gets put down, and we read books and things like that in our bedroom. We don't have a TV in our room and things like that. But that's, again, your personal values, Any questions? Anyone disagree with what I'm saying? Was there food for thought here? Kathy, you're very quiet in the back there. You good? Good. Right, guys? Yes?
Just the last comment from the company point of view.
Yep.
We've seen quite a lot. There's the young people coming into the company, the graduates and people like that.
Yeah.
Their social skills are zero. Because they have been sitting at home or doing whatever.
Yeah.
They don't want to come into work. They don't have to come into work. And we've got a hybrid scenario, so you don't have to. But they prefer to stay at home, which is fine. But you never see them. You don't know who these people are. And these are young people that need to learn the industry that they're in. But they've become completely antisocial, and we're in a very social industry.
Yeah.
And the people don't want to go to functions and stuff. And it's a real challenge, but that's because that's where they've probably grown up over the last 4 years, 5 years, 8 years.
I think what we forget is that the behaviors that we're teaching these kids now, they are going to teach their kids. So if we are fostering those antisocial type behaviors where they are unable to connect with another human being,
can you imagine
I can't imagine what it's going to be like a generation or two from now. It's going to be a bit problematic. And I'll tell you, one of the areas we've seen it is, I think you mentioned in the meeting on Monday, to get the kids to wear their masks when COVID started, constantly reminding them to keep their masks on. Now that there are no masks, there are kids who are really struggling to get them to take the mask off because they want to hide and not be seen. And that's definitely a COVID consequence. There's no doubt in my mind. It's a problem. It's a huge problem. Lots of conversations around it.
I'd like to loop back to something Karen said, and I think perhaps we're talking about the antisocial behavior. Screen time that promotes antisocial behavior is a problem. And I think that's part of a differentiation that you need to be putting into place when having that discussion and that framework. I think what's important is that everybody in the family needs to be part of that, including everybody in the conversation. Doesn't mean everybody is right, but everybody being included in the conversation, even if mom and dad put their foot down, but there's an explanation as to why it happens. It's important for the buy-in, and that it's common knowledge and there's conversation around it. Okay. I think that's where the control and the ownership comes from. Anybody else? Guys, thank you very much. I hope you found this interesting and informative. Certainly, if you want to go into digital citizenship and things like that, go and look up Emma Sadlier and things like that. The two teachers at school who teach digital citizenship are Ms. Brief and Mrs. Osterwick. It's very much part of where the curriculum is, especially with the younger kids, teaching that. There's a certificate that the youngsters do, and it's built into the framework of school as well. And you can use that as part of a reference guide if you want to. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Well done.